What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be showcasing some battles in the Fantasy Cup. And if you've been following the channel for a while, you'll know that every time this cup comes around, I try to run a triple dragon team, and this time I've opted for 3 buff dragon Pokemon with Shadow Flygon, Shelgon, and Shadow Kingdra. Now I don't think the Waterfall buff is hugely significant in the Open greatly because a lot of Waterfall users also have really good other fast move options, but in this meta I do think it's quite good with Pokemon like Primarina and even Empoleon. But a Pokemon you probably didn't even consider trying Waterfall on is Shadow Kingdra. Now I've said this a few times over the years that Kingdra is simultaneously the most annoying Pokemon to use and the most annoying Pokemon to go up against if you're using Octazooka, because that debuff just completely changes how a matchup is going to go. But at least with Waterfall as the fast move, you are way less dependent on Octazooka for that water type damage, and the debuff doesn't feel quite as important. I'm also opting for a triple ground moveset on the Flygon because without it, Azumarill unfortunately just completely steamrolls this team, and to no surprise, it is absolutely everywhere in this meta. Now for the final Pokemon, of course, I'm running Shelgon, which to be honest, I didn't expect to do that well, but there are actually surprisingly a lot more dragons in the meta than you might expect, so that Dragon Breath plus Twister combination is really nice. Now this team really struggles up against, say, an Altaria lead, and a bit less common, but if you see Alone and Sand Slash, you might as well just instantly concede. But outside of that, this team genuinely has so much more play than you might expect. So with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. Which Pokemon has been your MVP so far in the early Fantasy Cup meta? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Shadow Flygon into Azumarill. Now, surprisingly, this is actually where we want to see the Azumarill because we have decent neutral damage here with our ground typing. Firstly, I am going to go for a Sand Tomb. I don't expect a shield here. Sand Tomb, of course, not going to deal much damage, but it drops their defense, and that is going to be vital. Now, if the opponent doesn't have the best IVs on their Azumarill, then actually dropping their defense, going for a Scorching Sands, this is going to inflict huge damage, and it will force them to swap out there. Otherwise, Shadow Flygon will Mudshot farm them down. Now they swap into a Shadow Excadrill, a go for the Sand Tomb, dealing not dealing any damage at all there, but of course dropping their defense and then dealing big damage with the Waterfalls from my Shadow Kingdra, and their final Pokemon is going to be Galarian Stunfisk. I'm going straight for Octazooka. Octazooka grabs a shield and it drops their attack there, which means unfortunately for them, Earthquake would not KO. They swap out, they try to clear a debuff and maybe catch a charge move, but we just farm them down. We come out with a second Octazooka, getting the KO up against the Galarian Stunfisk, and I'm able to take that game. So, G2 up there into the next battle. We're going to see Azumarill in the lead once again. Now, I will say, like, basically 80% of leads are going to be Azumarill in this meta, but either way, we're going to play this out exactly the same, and maybe this time around, they might have a slightly bulkier Azumarill, in which case, I will have to play this slightly different, but either way, I'm still going to shield that first charge move every time. Once again, they full send a Play Rough, so that is quite interesting. If they have Ice Beam, of course, that is the way to go, so that does imply that maybe they're not running it. Either way, I'm actually going to throw a Sand Tomb here because, well, obviously, they're not on Ice Beam. I can still outpace them to another charge move. Now here, I don't know if this was necessarily the right play, swapping out, basically catching a Play Rough onto my Shelgon, but they're going to come in with a Fortress, and their over farming allowing me to reach a Flamethrower. Plus, the opponent doesn't shield for whatever reason, and now they're going to come in with a Fire Fang Mawile. Now, maybe I could have settled for a Twister. It wouldn't have done much damage at all. That is triple resisted. So here, I'm just going to come back in with the Flygon, force them to throw some energy. The opponent does full send a Vice Grip, not going for like a power-up punch or anything like that, which means we can come in with the Kingdra. Of course, I am double resisting the Fire Fang damage. Waterfalls hitting for pretty decent neutral damage. Can't quite get the full farm down there. Actually, yes, we can. We come out with so much energy, but it doesn't matter. One Waterfall takes out the Azumarill, and I'm able to take that game. So, G2's one there into the next battle. We're going to see Altaria in the lead. Now, this is a nightmare lead. Of course, I don't have any Dragon-type coverage, but the opponent doesn't know that, so I'm going to go for a Sand Tomb, and Sand Tomb is going to be shielded by the Altaria, and the opponent is also going to throw, because if they let a debuffed Twister hit them, that is going to do big damage. Now, fortunately for me, the opponent's going to come in with Primarina, so I'm going to bank a ton of energy, and then come in with my Shadow Kingdra. Of course, both on Waterfall, but Kingdra is going to double resist the fast move pressure whilst they are single resisting my waterfalls, but a single swift will put them into full waterfall farm down range. So I'm going to shield here. The opponent goes for a second disarming voice. The opponent recognizing they're going to be farmed down, and so they come back in with the Altaria. Now I overfarm. I farm up to a potential outrage, and Swift is going to grab a shield, but it's also a CMP tie. That is literally best case scenario for me. Sky Attack gets the KO. We can now come back in with the Shelgon. I'm going to look to overfarm here. Twister probably gets the KO from this range, actually just barely missing out, but one more Dragon Breath gets the full farm down. They come in with a second Waterfall user of their own in Shadow Empoleon. I go for Flamethrower, dealing big damage, and the opponent tries to catch a charge move, but we weren't quite there yet. We come out with a second Flamethrower loaded, so the opponent just concedes the match. So, GG's opponent there is the next battle. We can see Empoleon in the lead this time around. So, a positive lead matchup for me. The opponent is going to eventually swap out into their own Flygon. However, they are on Dragon Tail rather than Mudshot, and that is a little bit trickier for me. I'm going to go for a Sand Tomb. I'm going to, of course, debuff their defense, and now I'm going to come in with my Shelgon. However, I let them get way too much energy, which means they can now outpace me to back-to-back Twisters, and so I will have to double shield. I can now go for a full farm down, still taking big damage from the Dragon Tails, but I'm still fairly healthy here. So let's see, the opponent's going to come back in with the Empoleon. I'm going straight for Flamethrower. Flamethrower gonna hit for neutral damage, and it does decent damage in the process. Now they did stay in with the Empoleon just a little bit there, so they're able to outpace me to the Drill Peck. We come in with the Kingdra, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Corviknight. I'm going to look to overfarm here and then fire off the Octazooka. Octazooka gonna be shielded, but it looks like I debuffed their attack stat once again, which means Payback not gonna deal that much damage here. They will, however, just barely outpace me to an Air Cutter. I should barely live this, but I don't know if I get off the charge move, so I swap out. I bank the energy for later, hoping that will somehow help me, but Scorching Sands isn't enough damage to KO, and whilst I should barely still live this, I think I debuffed their attack stat once again. Unfortunately, they can snipe with Empoleon, and whilst, yes, I would win CMP as I go for an Octazooka here, unfortunately, just a single sand attack should be enough damage to get the fast move farm down, and I end up losing that game. But GG's opponent there is the next battle. Going to see Shadow Flygon into Turtonator. A great lead matchup for me. The opponent's going to be safe swapping into a Shadow Fortress, of course, on Volt Switch, but I can go straight for Scorching Sands. Now, something I did note that in this matchup here, unfortunately, going straight for Scorching Sands isn't really that viable, just because I do need to throw a second charge move anyways, and actually, if I went straight for Sand Tomb, 2 Sand Tombs will put them into Mudshot farm down range anyway, so yeah, maybe we don't need to full send a Scorching Sands there. Either way, that's still fine with me. They're going to come in with a Shadow Excadrill, and I swap into my Shelgon, which maybe isn't the best idea, but I do have 2 shields still in play, so I'm going to shield this. I'm then just going to go straight for a Twister. Twister is resisted damage, but this is a Shadow Excadrill. Very glassy, and the opponent not even able to reach another charge move there. They come back in with a Turtonator, and I'm going to overfarm and then fire off the Twister. Twister should be grabbing the first shield from the opponent. I bank another Twister. I'm able to swap into Shadow Flygon, go for the combo play, and force a CMP tie as Sand Tomb grabs the final shield. At this point, I definitely don't need to shield this. I'm going to save my shield for the Shelgon, but I actually don't need it as the opponent committing to a full farm down. Twister gets the KO up against the debuff Turtonator, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there is the next battle. We're going to see Shadow, Alolan Sandslash in the lead. So this is just a nightmare for me. I do stay in initially just to see if they were on Powder Snow. If they're on Shadow Claw, then it is actually quite playable for me. But nope, they're on Powder Snow, so have to get out of there. Of course, Kingdra is my only neutral matchup, and then they come in with a Zoomrill. So things going from bad to worse. Unfortunately, just Swift's not going to add up at all in this matchup. This isn't the worst matchup if we've already dealt a lot of damage with the Shadow Flygon, because I can often put them into range where I can Waterfall farm them down. But of course, in this matchup here, that is not how this game is played, so we're just going to have to let it go down there. I'm then going to come in with the Shadow Flygon. I think my only win condition is just farming up a boatload of energy on both my remaining Pokemon, as we do have Flamethrower, we've got Sand Tombs, we've got Scorching Sands, we can at least hit the Sandslash for super effective damage, but we have to be very smart about how we play this. So here, what I'm hoping to happen is the opponent to try and snipe me with the Sandslash, and they do try to snipe, but they just come in with the Empoleon, and that's going to be game over. The opponent does not need to shield here at all. They can just save both shields for the Sandslash. There is literally nothing I can do here, but I'm going to try and play this out anyways as we go for Sand Tomb. The opponent likely to come back in with the Sandslash, and I'm just full sending Scorching Sands. My only win condition is if they no shield, but the opponent's going to shield there, so I'm going to save them some time. I mean, I don't really save them that much time because, like, 3 more Powder Snows gets the full farm down. But either way, GG to Trainer. Of course, if you do see a lot of Alolan Sandslash, then this team probably isn't going to work out for you. But I believe that was the only one I saw with my 5 sets today, so not the worst thing ever to lose really hard to a single Pokemon if you just don't see it. And also, a lot of you guys probably thinking, what do you do up against Wigglytuff? Well, I haven't seen any Wigglytuff in the meta so far. That's not to say that it won't exist later on, but at least for now, this team is kind of safe from Wigglytuff if people just aren't using it. But anyways, we're going to go for Flamethrower here. Unfortunately, just barely outpaced to the next charge move, but that's absolutely okay. Drill Peck, going to get the KO. I'm pretty low on my Flygon, so I'm going to come in with the Kingdra, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Fortress, but I am triple resisting the fast food pressure. We go straight for Sandtomb. Sandtomb not going to be shielded. I might as well shield here because they're not going to be able to farm me down even if they go for a Sandtomb debuff, which they do. They cannot Volt Switch farm down. It is triple resisted. We go for another Sandtomb, grab the final shield. They're committing to the farm down, but they're just not getting it. We can go for another Sandtomb. Sandtomb gets the KO at this point. We come back in with the Shadow Kingdra, and I'm going straight for Swift. Swift, of course, non-stat resisted, but it gets the KO up against the Apollyon from that range, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's opponent there is an X-Battle. I can see Turtonator in the lead. So, great lead matchup for me, and the opponent is choosing to stay in. So, that's fine with me. We're going to go for Sandtomb here. Of course, if they do want to no-shield this, they can tank it. However, I actually don't really mind that much because, well, they overfarm. They allow me to get to a second Sandtomb anyways. Plus, if they do full send a Dragon Claw here, I can just shield once, and I will be able to Mudshot farm them down. As, of course, now they are double debuffed. The opponent's now going to swap into Empoleon, and I'm just going to full send a Scorching Sands here. Of course, they've seen the Sandtomb. Scorching Sands is unfortunately shielded by the opponent. I honestly thought they might no shield there, expecting another Sandtomb, but either way, it doesn't really matter too much. I'm going to come in with the Kingdra. I do not need to shield the first charge move, as of course, while they are hitting full resisted damage with the fast move pressure, they fire off the Drill Peck. I'm now actually just going to bank that energy, come in with the Shelgon, but their final Pokemon is going to be a Fire Fang Marwile, but I'm so far ahead on energy. Flamethrower, gonna hit for super effective damage. It barely doesn't KO, but it puts them into triple resisted Dragon Breath farm down range. We come out with a Twister loaded. Twister, again, barely not enough damage to KO, but we Dragon Breath farm them down. We could Dragon Breath farm down the Turtonator, so the opponent just concedes the match. So, GG's opponent there is the next battle. I can see Galarian Weezing in the lead. Now, this is a tricky matchup, especially if, like in this case, they are on Brutal Swing. If they're on Sludge, of course, I resist the typical charge moves, as they should be on Sludge and Overheat, but since they're on Brutal Swing, they firstly outpace me, but also Brutal Swing, I'm going to hit for neutral damage. That will put me into Fairy Wind farm down range, so I'm forced to swap out of that matchup, and again, they go for another Brutal Swing there. I was expecting a Sludge that time around, but maybe they're on Brutal Swing and Overheat. Either way, they're going to come in with Empoleon, and unfortunately, my charge moves are completely walled. We don't get a debuff, so Drill Peck is going to deal big damage there. Can I reach another Octazooka? Well, it looks like the opponent is going to throw some energy, so I don't really mind that too much, but we're still in a really bad position. Gonna come in with the Flygon. Honestly, I thought I had some residual energy there. Obviously, I just misremembered. And that means I'm gonna have to swap into my Shelgon. The opponent's gonna swap back into their Galarian Weezing. And I'm praying that Twister gets the KO. It's double resisted, and it doesn't quite put them into range where I snipe with a single Dragon Breath either, meaning I have to use my final shield. But doesn't make a huge difference here. What is their final Pokemon? They're actually not gonna reveal it just yet because they come back in with the Empoleon. But their final Pokemon is actually a Fire Fang Shadow Salamence. So if I was maybe just slightly healthier here, Twister, he's going to grab the final shield and maybe reach another charge boost. So potentially that did make a difference there. Maybe not, but either way, GG's to that opponent there. Into the next battle, we're going to see Empoleon in the lead once again. So the opponent is going to be swapping out, and they swap into a Shadow Dragonite. Now, this is decent for me, as I can shield once, hopefully, and then go for a full farm down, and they full send a Dragon Claw, so we can definitely do that, and we come out with quite a lot of energy. Of course, not much HP remaining, but I can go for a Flamethrower, and maybe even a Twister as well, if they try and commit to the farm down here, but let's see. Flamethrower, gonna connect, does decent damage, and we do also reach a departing Twister. However, I'm now recognizing this is just going to be an ABB style team, and the opponent's final Pokemon is unfortunately going to be an Altaria. So here, I'm actually going to go for an Octazooka. I expect a shield anyways, so I might as well try and fish for a debuff, and Octazooka is actually going to get that debuff. However, what that ends up doing is allowing them to just fully farm me down here and get way more energy than I was hoping for, which means I will need to make a catch in the end game. Otherwise, Flygon is going to be KO'd by a charge move. So here, I'm going to shield the Sky attack. I'm going to try and make the catch, but I swap out one turn too late there, which is super unfortunate for me, and they are on Moonblast. I've seen quite a few Altaria running Moonblast in this meta, which is quite interesting considering you'd expect Flamethrower to be pretty useful coverage. However, of course, Moonblast very good into my triple dragon team there, so maybe they're seeing a lot of dragons as well. But either way, GG's to a trainer into next battle. We're going to see a Shadow Giratina in the lead. They throw way too early. This is just an ancient power, which is resisted damage. I'm now full sending Scorching Sands. They swap out, they catch onto Fortress, but I really don't mind that play there, as now we can go for a Sand Tomb as well, and Sand Tomb might end up grabbing a shield from the opponent. The opponent is not going to bother shielding, but they cannot commit to a farm down, which is fine with me. They're forced to throw a Sand Tomb of their own, and now we can come in and Dragon Breath farm down with the Shelgon. Now they come back in with the Shadow Giratina, but I'm able to reach a Twister on the CMP tie. Twister is going to grab the final shield, and at this point, I'm going to start using my shields as well. The opponent is just going to bait with another Ancient Power there. I expect the opponent to try and make a catch of the next charge move, which they go for, but they swap into Doublade, and this is GG's. Flamethrower doesn't quite get the KO. I swap out there just in case they do reach a Sacred Sword, which I didn't want to shield, and as a result, the opponent is just going to concede the match. So, GG's opponent there is the next battle. We're going to see Shadow Dragonite in the lead. So this is a nightmare lead matchup for me. I'm just going to have to stay in here, go for a Sand Tomb, expecting to grab a shield, as of course, I could be on Twister. I'm able to grab the shield, and now I'm dealing big damage with the Dragon Breaths. The opponent clearly doesn't have the best response to a Shelgon safe swap, so they stay in, they go for a superpower, but now they swap into a Shadow Fortress. Now here, I very easily could have gone for a Flamethrower and got the KO. However, what I'm going to do instead is farm up to 100 energy, and now fire off the charge move. This way, I don't expect them to shield. Flamethrower gets the one shot, and if they come back in with a Dragonite, I've already got a Twister loaded. So the opponent is going to do exactly that. Twister, of course, should be grabbing the final shield here, and we can still deal some decent damage there, with the Dragon Breaths, but not quite enough to put them into Waterfall farm down range. The opponent full sends another superpower, and their final Pokemon is a Firefang Marwile. So of course, I'm going to go for Octazooka here. Octazooka, not going to deal much damage. We don't get the debuff, but I do swap out. I'm able to make the catch as the opponent is just going to go for a power-up punch. And here, I thought I made a mistake. I didn't mean to go for the Mudshot farm down there, but Dragonite was lower than I remembered. And I'm actually able to double resisted Mudshot farm down the Dragonite before they Dragon Breath farm me down and come out with another superpower. And so I'm able to just barely take that game. But GG's to a trainer into next battle. Another Altaria in the lead. And again, really poor matchup for me here. I have to just stay in, at least initially. We're going to go for a Sand Tomb. They even call the bait there, but huge mistake as they end up throwing on CMP, and now they're debuffed. They end up shielding the second charge move. Of course, you don't see the shield animation. I still don't understand why this is still a glitch here. Hopefully, when they have sort of fixed GBL, that is something that does get patched with the GBL update, although I'm not really that hopeful, really, I guess. Either way, they're going to come in with Empoleon, so even in the Fantasy Cup, you are going to see the common Altaria plus Empoleon core. I'm going to swap out into my Shadow Kingdra. I can no-shield the first charge move here, potentially look to shield the next one, and then go for a full farm down. But actually, you know what? Shelgon might be more useful for me, so instead, I'm going to no-shield as they go for the Drill Peck. We put them into range where we can perfectly Dragon Breath farm them down here. However, I am getting very low. So the opponent is going to reveal their final Pokemon to be a Shadow Fortress. However, unfortunately, I think their win condition is just no shielding here. Of course, Flamethrower, double super effective, it gets the KO, but I'm not going to reach two more Twisters. So the opponent, very well played there, recognizing they can just save a shield for the Altaria, and there was nothing I could do, and so they do win that game. But GG's to a trainer into next battle. I'm going to see a Waterfall Primarina. I'm going to swap out, hoping to catch a Hydro Cannon onto my Shadow Kingdra, and I'm able to do exactly that. Then I'm going to come in with a Fortress, which Kingdra does have the worst matchup up against Fortress for this team, just because we've got Flamethrower on the Shelgon, and of course, I do triple resist the Fast Food Pressure, and, well, I also resist Rock Tomb on the Flygon, but either way, we can go for Octazooka. Octazooka is going to put them into range where a single Sand Tomb will KO. Now, I'm fairly low on the Shadow Flygon already. I don't even want to tank a Sand Tomb here, so I throw straight away. They come back in with the Primarina, and you know what? They might not expect this, so I'm full sending Scorching Sands, and the opponent is going to no-shield. It gets the KO, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Galarian Stunfisk. So at this point, I can just start settling for the sand tombs. They're going to shield the first one as they have just seen a Scorching Sands. I can now go for a second sand tomb. They might no-shield this, and they do, but they're now double debuffed. So Dragon Breaths, I hope, are dealing slightly more damage now. We should put them into range where I can just double shield. I don't need to throw any twisters, and I can just fully Dragon Breath farm them down. So of course, I'm going to use my final shield here, or sorry, my first shield. We shield the rock side, we get the Dragon Breath farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.